Okay, and at some point, did you come into possession of some Google records that helped inform your analysis?
I was.
And in terms of what was your understanding of who those Google records were associated with?
I was told they were associated with Jaylin.
Okay. And did you, in fact, use those records for the final analysis that you did that you're prepared to testify about today?
I did.
Your Honor, with that, I'm holding what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 16. Again, this is a certified copy of Google location history from an account with the same phone number of 313-575-3450, the account name being Jaylin Omar 14@gmail.com. I also have Proposed Exhibit 17, which is a certified copy of a printout of subscriber information from that account, and Proposed Exhibit 18, which is a certified copy of search history from that same account. And I, again, move for all of those exhibits to be admitted under 902 subsection 11.
Any objection?
No objection.
Go ahead, Third Witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. And did you ultimately prepare a report of your analysis in this case for presentation in court?
I did.
And I'm holding what's been marked as Proposed Exhibit 19. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Is Proposed Exhibit 19 a copy of the report that you prepared in this case?
Yes, it is a report I created for this case.
And when you're looking at the raw data that is used to inform that report, is it fair to say that that data is quite voluminous?
It is. It can be.
Potentially thousands of rows of cellular records?
Yes, easily thousands of rows in multiple Excel spreadsheets.
And that report that you prepared, does that help summarize some of the data and some of the analysis that you did concerning that data?
It does.
And does that report, would you say, would that fairly and accurately reflect the analysis that you did in this case?
It does.
Your Honor, with that, I move to admit Proposed Exhibit 19.
No objection.
All right, submitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I publish?
Yes.
Okay, just looking at page 1 of the report, does this just give us a summary of the sort of information that you obtained to analyze in this case?
It is. In this case, it was two T-Mobile numbers, 313-575-3450, 313-913-5931, and then the Google account of Jaylin Omar 14@gmail.com.
Okay. And I just want to briefly publish what's been admitted as Exhibit 17. Your Honor, may I publish?
Yes.
And is this the subscriber information for the Google account as you understand it?
Yes, that is a subscriber from the Jaylin Omar 14@gmail.com.
And do you see where it says recovery SMS
Yes,
right here? Does that provide a phone number?
it does. It provides 575-3450.
And is that the same number that you had obtained records for?
That I was provided records for, yes.
Okay. And just looking at, also, Your Honor, if I may publish just briefly Exhibit 14.
Sure.
If you look at Exhibit 14 in the spreadsheet entitled Sub-Amdocs, in your experience, what type of information do we get from a, spreadsheet open. What type of information do we get from a spreadsheet with that, that sort of title to it?
Yeah, so that is the subscriber information that is maintained by T-Mobile for a particular phone number. And it would have what they have in their system for, as you can see there at the top, name, address, account status, C is for canceled, the name or the date for the subscriber name effective, more information about the account, and then some device information as well.
Okay. And so the subscriber information for this particular set of records for 313-575-3450 indicates a subscriber name of what?
Jaylin Brazier.
Okay. And moving back to Exhibit 19, can you kind of walk us through this slide and sort of the just the overall background of the analysis that you did as presented here?
Yes, this is the most words that you'll see on any of the report. It's just basically giving the background information and then talks a little bit about what's coming on the future slides. So the background is a lot of the stuff we already talked about. So the numbers that I was provided, and then any other accounts, such as the Google account. The methodology talks about taking the information across those thousands of lines in the Excel spreadsheets, and then as well as the timing advance data, and then the Google information that I was provided, and then using the cell site locations, so where every cell site has a unique identifier within the world, and in this case, southeastern Michigan, and then matching up that information from the phone records to the tower list, and then visually depicting all that information on the map. So visually depict the tower, the side of the tower, and if available, how far the device is from that tower at the time for the phone records. And then for the Google information, we're provided a latitude, longitude, and as well as a accuracy radius. So taking that latitude, longitude, putting it into the mapping software, and visually depicting what that is and where it is.
Okay, and just moving to the next slide about cellular towers. Can you just explain, just in general, how cellular towers work?
Yes, so these are not towers used in this case. These are just examples of how they may look. They may be hidden in the flagpole, as you can see in the upper left, where you can't visibly see any antennas. They may be on the right is a common one you may see, and they're kind of in that triangle format. And then they could also just be on the tops of buildings. But no matter how they look, they all operate the same. So as I mentioned before, your phone is a modern day two-way radio. You want to call your sister in California, you dial her numbers on your phone, your handset connects with that tower, and then it routes that call to your sister. As all that's happening, it's recording the identifier for what tower you use, what side of the tower you used, and then if the data is available, how far you are away from that tower at that time.
And if we go to page 4, can you explain how sectors work when it comes to cell phone towers? Yes,
so as you kind of saw on that previous slide, how there was that one tower that had the triangle, that's the best example of how sectors are. So sectors are just sides of the tower. Generally speaking, each tower has 3 sides. Each one covers approximately 120 degrees. And then with all 3 sides, you get your 360-degree area of coverage. Not everyone has the exact same orientation. So the exhibit on the right is just an example. And there are towers that may not have 3 sides, and they'd be called omni, directional towers, then they just have one sector that provides a 360-degree area of coverage. But generally speaking, there'll be 3 sectors, 3 sides, each one covering 120.
So hypothetically, if I'm a T-Mobile customer and I use my phone to place a call to somebody, is there going to be a record that gets generated by T-Mobile that gives some information about the nature of that call?
Yes, it'll tell you everything about that call in terms of the location, not the contents, but the date and time you placed that call, your phone number, the phone number you called, the tower number, and the side of the tower that was available for that call, or that was used for that call.
Okay. And in terms of the, for like that sort of call detail record, how accurate of information can you get in terms of the location of the phone, just from the call detail record itself?
So just from that tower and sector, it's just going to give me the general geographic area. So a lot of it is going to be based off of the layout of the network. So all these cell towers are all out here throughout southeastern Michigan, all across Detroit, East Point, and they're all spaced out differently. More urban areas, such as downtown Detroit, would be more densely populated in terms of cell sites, so those have a smaller coverage. Whereas if you were to go out west, let's say you start getting into the far outskirts of Oakland County, you have towers that are spaced farther apart that would have a wider area of coverage. But with just this alone, it's going to be that general geographic area where that sector is pointed and where coverage is focused.
Okay. And if we go to the next slide on page 5, I want to ask, in addition to the type of call detail record that you just discussed, is there a more precise type of data that can get recorded by our cell phone providers?
Yes, and that's going to be on the slide after this one.
Okay.
Would you like me to just explain this slide briefly?
Yeah, let's. I guess let's go through this one first. I'm sorry.
So this is just going to be the illustrations that you'll see on the actual maps. So as I'm visually displaying that information on the spreadsheet, the sector will look kind of like, I'll call it a wedge there in the upper left. You'll see that shaded area inside there. That's not depicting the actual coverage area. It's just helping you see on the map to see the primary direction that RF signal is pointed. On the right, as I mentioned, you may have an Omni tower, which only has one sector. You'll see that just as a circle. And then the bottom is just the call-out box that you'll see on the maps that tells you about that interaction between the phone and the network. So the unique identifier, so in this case, 21610, sector 1, and then the times that was used. And it's the timing advance record, which again, the main difference there is that I'm now getting a distance that device is located at that time. That distance will be there. So for example, in line 1, at that time, at those 2 times, the phone was approximately 0.24 miles away from that tower and sector. Okay.
And with that, sort of as a segue into the next slide, page 6, again, is there sort of a more precise set of data you can get when it comes to a phone's location, other than just like the call detail record that tells you the tower and the sector that a phone interacted with during a particular phone call?
Yes, and that would be, for T-Mobile, it's the timing advance information. So it's going to tell you how far away that device was from that tower. So what the timing advance does, it allows you to refine that geographic area that the device was located. So for example, as I mentioned before, you have a tower and sector. It's just this general geographic area that could be anywhere within the coverage area of that sector. Whereas here is telling you the device is registering 0.24 miles away from that tower. So it really helps you refine. And as a phone is in an area for an extended period of time, you may have arcs that start intersecting with each other. And as they start intersecting, you can refine that area even more to even get down to an immediate geographic area around a certain point, a broader area.
And so in this case, for your analysis, did you have just call detail records available, or did you also have timing advance data available?
We had both. although the volume of data varies between the two phones.
Okay. And which phone number had more timing advance data compared to the other phone?
It would be the phone number. The phone number ending in 3450 had the most of the timing advance data, which was, I was told, associated with Jaylin Brazier.
And when it comes to like timing advance data, what triggers that sort of data being created and stored by T-Mobile?
So timing advance data, it's always occurring in the background. Timing advance is necessary for your phone to operate on the network. It basically aligns everybody. So if all you were trying to call at the same time, it aligns everyone's communication with the network so everybody can do whatever activity they want to do. If you want to surf the web, if you want to make a phone call. So it's always occurring. The question is what then is retained by T-Mobile? So just because for the other phone there was, I believe, only one timing advance record provided, it doesn't mean that timing advance was not occurring in the background. There was only one record that was retained by T-Mobile.
Okay, and in terms of the records that you get for timing advance data, would that be associated with like a specific phone call that's made, or is that just sort of data that gets created on an ongoing basis?
It's not necessary for a phone call, not necessary for a text message, which is ongoing basis in the background. Your phone call just be sitting right here on this table, and it would be generating timing advance records without you doing anything.
Okay, and then if let's say right now my phone hypothetically was a T-Mobile phone and generating timing advance data, and you later went and looked at that data for like this second, this exact point in time, what sort of information might you get from like looking at that one data point later on?
So if we just looked at one data point, or just data kind of around this time, we're going to get that tower that was being used, the side of the tower, so it would be a side of the sector that would be facing in this direction, and then the distance the phone was. So we'd be seeing this arc, which would be coming over this courthouse, and it would provide that information for that single event.
Okay, and how is the distance calculated?
So it's based on, it's a time measurement. So a signal is sent from the tower to the device and back, and then based off that time, a distance is calculated. So the cell signals are traveling at the speed of light. So it basically takes the time, calculates that by the speed of light, and then you get the distance.
Okay, and so like hypothetically in this, sort of example on the screen, you see the tower at the bottom. That would be the tower, correct?
Yeah.
At the sort of end of the wedge.
Yes, sir.
And then the wedge itself, does that represent the sector?
Yes, it's filling out the sector, so that'd be the orientation for that sector that's depicted here on this map.
Okay, and then what is the arc sort of reflect?
So the arc is the distance. So that dotted line you see, let's just say hypothetically that was 0.2 miles. That's the 0.2 mile measurement, and then that arc is drawn, which is approximately 80 meters wide.
Okay, and so if you were looking at this data point, like where would you expect the phone in question to be located in this sort of image?
I would start with in the arc. It is possible though the phone could be slightly on either side of the arc as well.
Okay. And when it comes to the sort of data that you have available from phone providers, what is the most accurate sort of data that can give you the most pinpoint information about the location of a phone?
In a historical sense?
Yes.
So in a historical sense, timing advance data, in this case for T-Mobile, will give you that most accurate, refined area of where that device was at a certain time, over a certain time period, or over a time range.
Okay, and have you ever used phone data from a provider like T-Mobile to track fugitives as part of your job, or to track people in real time?
Yes. pretty much all the time.
Okay, and what would be the sort of data that you would use, what would be the best data that you have to use to track individuals in that way?
It would be the time advance information that I would analyze to identify where a device would be to help those locate, whether it's a fugitive, missing kid, other evidence, whatever it may be.
Let's move to page 7. What sort of information is on this particular slide?
So previously you saw the subscriber information that was shown for this Google account. Also in the Google return is device information. So Google will record what the actual identifier for the device is for your phone. So your phone has an identifier called an IMEI that is similar to a VIN in a car. There is only one unique identifier for your phone everywhere. So Google is recording that unique device that is generating records or that they may have location for. And that is that number that is highlighted 35266-566-4637-574. Looking at the time advance records, or the call detail records as well, you get that same information as to that unique device that is utilizing the network for T-Mobile. And it has that exact same number. So the same device that was generating location information for the Google account is the one being used on the T-Mobile account.
Okay, and if we go to page 8, can you summarize what we're looking at here on page 8?
Yeah, so when I just kind of keep going forward, I initially provided all these phone records and then provided locations and dates and times that I'm requesting to analyze. These were the 3 locations that I was provided. The first would be the residence with the number 1, which is on the left side of the screen. That was 19451 Greenfield Road in Detroit, Michigan. The second is the victim residence, which would be on the far right side of the screen. That is 22166 Melrose Court in East Point, Michigan. And the body location, which is 26 Beersford Street. I have listed here Detroit, Michigan, but it's also Highland Park. Depending on the mapping software you put it in, it'll locate it either way.
Okay, and that particular location of 26 Beresford and Highland Park, did you familiarize yourself with what's at that location?
Yes, I went by it this morning.
And what did you observe at that location?
It's a kind of an open lot, and there were multiple dumpsters in that area.
Okay. And if we go to the next slide, slide 9. So is this the first sort of part of your presentation about the specific mapping of these devices?
Yes, it's the first visual slide that is actually depicting all that information contained from both the T-Mobile spreadsheets as well as Google.
And what is there a particular date and time frame that is depicted on this particular slide?
Yes, this is January 4th, 2022, between 9:54 p.m. and 10:49 p.m.
Okay, and in terms of, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit here. Starting at this point, number 1, do you see that on the left side of the screen?
I do.
If we go up here, what sort of information corresponds to point number 1?
So it'd be on the very top line, it's showing the time advance information. There's a record at approximately 9:54 and 10 o'clock p.m., 0.24 miles away from that tower and sector that's visualized there, which is consistent with the geographic area of the Greenfield address.
Okay, and this data that we're looking at here, is this limited to one of the specific devices that you looked at?
Number 1 is the other device is going to be located on the right side of the map.
Okay, so at this point in time, for number 1, at 9:54 p.m. and 10 p.m. And again, is this for the device that you had information was associated with the defendant?
It was, yes.
Okay. Is there any information we can glean here about the location of the device at that time?
The timing in advance, and then there's also the Google information. It's consistent with that Greenfield address around that time.
Okay. And then at some point, does the device start to change locations?
It does. As that time moves on later in that window, up to that 10:49, it's going to have records consistent with travel east, eventually ending up in the area of the East Point address.
Okay. And if so, we jump ahead to point number 5. What is the time associated with point number 5?
10:26:53 p.m.
And what is the area? What's the general location of point number 5?
Just based off this map, it's in the Hazel Park area. You can see Hazel Park right underneath that arc.
Okay. And again, just to be clear, when we're looking at the arcs, are we looking at timing advance data?
We are.
And then when we start looking at these little red marks, what are those?
That is the information from the Google account. So it's the latitude, longitude, and then the accuracy radius that is provided by Google.
Okay, and so is it fair to say that you have Google information from sometimes, but not others?
Yes, you're not going to necessarily have, you can see kind of the back half of the time, there's a lot more Google information. You're not always going to have that all the time. It's just a matter of what's, again, retained and available by Google when they respond to a search warrant, just like T-Mobile.
Okay, and if we continue, so there's an arrow here. What does that arrow reflect?
So the arrow is just showing the direction of travel and to help orient the jury with the sequence of the records.
Okay, and so I guess during this time, from roughly 10 o'clock to about 10:26, is there any trajectory that you see that the phone took during that time based on the data that you analyzed?
Yes, so it's going to be going east, as you can see there, along kind of 8 Mile, and then north up to that 10:26:54 point, which is where number 5 is, up there in the Hazel Park area.
Okay, and then after being in the Hazel Park area, where does the device appear to move from there?
Then comes consistent coming back south, and then east along 8 Mile, along with the Google information, up to the geographic area of the Melrose Court address in East Point.
Okay, and so from this data, do you have any opinion about the general trajectory of the device from the time period of 10 o'clock to 10:40 p.m. on January 4th, 2022?
Yes, the device travels from the geographic area of the Greenfield address east towards the area of the Melrose Court address in East Point.
And again, when does the device consistent with first being in the general area of the East Point address?
Based off of that last Google location record, it's in the approximate 10:40 time, possibly a little bit after that, but around 10:40, it's consistent with that general geographic area.
Okay, and now in terms of the purple box near the East Point address, what sort of information is reflected there?
So that is all just the call detail records that were available for that phone. So I didn't have the timing advance information for that phone number around that time. So that's just illustrating the tower that was used. As you can see, that's a circle. So it was an omnidirectional one, which is providing coverage in 360 degrees, which is why you just see a circle.
Okay, and so the purple is for the other phone, would that be correct?
That is correct.
And that would be the phone that, based on the information you had, was attributed to the victim?
That is correct.
And so is the address, the victim's address that you had in Melrose Court in in East Point, is that within the coverage area for the tower that's reflected there?
That tower provides coverage in the geographic area around that address.
Okay. So would it be fair to say the phone, at the very least, is not inconsistent with being at her address at that time?
It's consistent with being in that area.
Okay.
I can't give you the exact address, just that consistent with that area.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide, number 10. So what time frame are we looking at now?
So this is still January 4th, going ahead in that time. So it's from approximately 10:52 p.m. on January 4th to 1:46 a.m. on January 5th.
Okay, and in terms of the earlier part of that range, that time range, would that be reflected in sort of this far right side of the slide?
It would be number 1 and number 2. Those records are around approximately 10:52 and 10:53 p.m.
Okay, and then when we get over to, let's say, number 7, what time would that be?
That is around 11:13 and 54 seconds p.m.
Okay, and how about number 8?
Number 8 starts at approximately 11:16 and 12 seconds p.m. and continues through 1:45:52 a.m.
Okay, and I guess when it comes to the device associated with the defendant, did you see any trajectory when it comes to that phone's location from 10:52 p.m. to approximately 11:15 p.m.?
Yes, it would be consistent with travel back from the geographic area of the Melrose Court address back to the geographic area of the Greenfield address in Detroit.
And during that time frame, did you have data available from the victim's phone to look at the location of her device?
No, the first record I had for the victim's phone was going to be, this raid was at the 12, basically after midnight, so 12 o'clock a.m. and 12 seconds, and then 12:36 a.m.
Okay, and if we look at...
I'm sorry. With that call box, that was for the time in advance. The first call detail record would be at approximately 11:34 p.m.
Okay, and if we look at that sort of 11:34 p.m. time range, where would the victim's phone be consistent with being at that time?
With just that 11:34, it's using that tower and sector that provides coverage of the geographic area of the Greenfield address in Detroit.
And during that same time, where would the phone associated with the defendant be consistent with being?
Also consistent with that same geographic area.
And do you see the box where there's a note about 1:15 a.m.?
I do.
And what does, can you describe what's reflected there?
Yes, so when you look at the actual call detail records, as the phone is on the network, it's recording information about the call, as I mentioned, including the tower and sector that's utilized. When a phone goes off the network, that location is no longer provided on the records. So beginning at approximately 1:15:31 a.m. through the duration of the records, the victim phone is consistent with no longer being on the T-Mobile network.
And what sort of things might cause a phone to no longer be on a cellular network?
So I can't give you an exact reason as to how it is, but basically anything that would cause that phone to lose power or some way connection with the network. Maybe it's not power, just any other element that separates that phone from the cellular network.
Okay, so if I turn my phone off, is it going to be off the network?
It'll be off the network.
And are you familiar with airplane mode?
Yes.
If I put my phone on airplane mode, would that take it off the network?
It would take it off the network as well.
If hypothetically my phone got damaged to the point that it wasn't functioning, would that take it off the network?
Yes.
Okay. I want to move to page 11. What time frame are we looking at this point?
For page 11, still January 5th, 2022, still moving forward in time between approximately 1:44 a.m. and 2:07 a.m.
Okay, now during this time, the victim's phone would be off the network, correct?
Yes, and by off the network, we're not getting cell site information, and we're seeing all these calls being sent to voicemail from the victim's records.
Okay, so you have no location data for the victim's phone as of 1:15 a.m. on January 5th, 2022, correct?
That is correct.
And so we're just looking at the records associated with the defendant's phone, correct?
That is correct.
And during this time from 1:44 a.m., at that starting point at 1:44 a.m., is there a specific location that the phone is consistent with being at?
Yes, there's a Google location record at 1:44 a.m. as well as a time advance record at approximately 1:45 a.m., which is consistent with the address on Greenfield in Detroit.
And that Google location, would that be this red box that's marked here at 1:44 a.m.?
It would be, and that point, if you go like just underneath the one, it's pointed to the one yellow box. It's the same point that was on the previous slide, carried over,
Okay.
and it's the point right there.
So starting at around 1:44, is there a point in time in which the phone is consistent with starting to move?
Yes, if you look at 2 and 3, that's 149 and then 150. So around that 149, 150, it's consistent with moving away from the Greenfield residence.
Okay, and what is the what's the direction of the phone's apparent movement at that point?
At that time or in total on this slide?
In total on the slide.
So in total on the slide, it's going to move from the area of the Greenfield address down to the Beresford location, which is in the bottom right part of the screen.
And at what point in time is the phone consistent with arriving in and around the area of the Beresford location?
It's going to be just after that 156 kind of time frame in the morning. You see a 156 point right there for Google location. We then have more at the 2:00 a.m. and then the first records on that number 7 tower, the timing advance, begins at around 156. So just after and around that 156 a.m. is consistent with arriving in that geographic area.
Okay, and there appear to be a lot of data points concentrated on this this freeway, correct? Is that the lodge?
It is.
And so the arcs, again, those are timing advance records, is that correct?
They are.
And then how about the sort of red marks that follow along the freeway?
Those are the Google location records.
The GPS records?
Yeah, so they're not all like pure GPS, but it's the records from Google that are mapped.
Okay. And if we go to the next slide 12, what's the time frame we're looking at here?
So this is still January 5th. This is the back end of that prior timing slot that we just went over on the prior slide, between approximately 2:00 a.m. and 2:07 a.m.
Okay, and again, which device is reflected here?
This would be the device associated with the defendant.
And is the device during this 7-minute time frame consistent with being on the move considerably or being more stationary during that time?
So I can't give you an exact timestamp of whether it's stationary or, at the exact time it's stationary. It's during this time frame, it's consistent with that immediate area around the Beresford address, which is the yellow icon.
So that would be this icon right here,
Yes.
and that's the parking lot that you described earlier, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this again is from 2 a.m. to 2:07 a.m. on January 5th.
That is correct.
Okay, moving to the next slide, slide 13. What's the time frame reflected here?
So still going forward in time, this is going to be from approximately 2:06 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. on January 5th.
Okay, and is there a point in time where, and again, are we looking at the device associated just with the defendant at this point?
That is correct.
And is there a point in time in which the device is consistent with starting to move away from that parking lot on Beresford and Highland Park?
There is.
And what is that point in time?
It would be around, we'll just say after that, approximately 2:08 time frame. If you go to the bottom right of you can see that grouping of Google location information, which is approximately 2:06:48 to 2:08:30 in that red box.
Okay.
After that point, there's then movement consistent kind of west-southwest to that 2:09 point, and then it continues on back up to the geographic area of the Greenfield address.
And is there a point in time where the phone is consistent with returning back to the area of the Greenfield address?
Yes, on tower mark number 9, that first timing advance measurement is going to be at approximately 2:16 a.m. And then there's a Google location record at 2:29 a.m.
Okay, and that's back at that back in the area of the Greenfield address.
Correct.
So during this time, from let's say approximately 2:08 a.m. to 2:16 a.m., what's the trajectory of the defendant's phone during that time?
It's consistent with travel along the lodge back to the area of the Greenfield address.
Okay. Moving to slide 14, did you also look at some records from another day associated with this case?
Yes, on January 6th.
Okay, and what is the relevant time frame of the records that you looked at on that particular day?
On this slide, it starts at approximately 1:31 p.m. through 2:01 p.m.
Okay, and so again, the records reflected on this slide are from the same device we've been talking about, the device associated with the defendant. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And during this time frame, at around 1:31 p.m., what is the approximate starting point of the device?
So the first time slot there in that window at approximately 1:31:05 is Google location. Beginning around 1:33, a time advance measurement, both consistent with starting in the area of the Greenfield address in Detroit.
And after starting in that area, at some point in time, does the phone appear to be on the move?
It does.
And is there, based on the data, is there a trajectory associated with the phone at that time?
Yes, similar to the previous day, trajectory is similar along the lodge to the address or to the area of the 26 Beresford address in Highland Park or Detroit.
And is there a particular time where the phone is consistent with arriving in the area of the Beresford address?
It would be first around approximately the 1:56 p.m. time frame. That's the first measurement on that time advance arc, and there's Google location records at approximately 1:57 and 2 o'clock p.m.
Okay. And if we go to the next slide, what information can we glean from this slide? Let me ask, what is the time frame that we're looking at here?
So going ahead in time, so approximately still 1:56 p.m. to 2:14 p.m. on January 6th.
Okay, and again, at that 1:56 p.m. time frame, where is the phone consistent with being at that time?
That one is still going to be down in the geographic area around the Beresford address. at the
Okay.
start.
And at some point after that 1:56 time frame, is the phone consistent with being on the move away from that location?
It is.
And at what point does the phone appear to start to move away from that location?
It would be after the approximate, you have Google location point right there at 2 o'clock. The last time advance measurement on that arc is at 1:56, so it would be after the 2 o'clock p.m. time frame.
Okay. And is there a trajectory associated with the phone after that 2 o'clock time frame?
Yes, it'd be consistent traveling through the lodge kind of west, then back northwest. But this time it goes to the area on the east side of the lodge, not immediately back to the Greenfield address in Detroit.
I want to ask you about what's been admitted as Exhibit 18, some Google search history. Your Honor, may I publish?
Sure.
And I'm going to show you what's been admitted as Exhibit 18. And I want to direct your attention to page 8. At the very bottom of page 8, do you see a date and time associated with that search?
Yes.
And what is the date and time reflected there?
It's January 6th, 2022, 7:35:24 p.m. UTC.
What does UTC mean?
UTC is a standard time, so in order to get that back into local time, you need to subtract 5 hours during this time of the year.
Okay, and if you subtract 5 hours, what would be the local time reflected for this search?
It would be 2:35:24 p.m.
On January 6th of 2022?
Correct, on January 6th.
And what is the search that's reflected there?
The search for our trash trucks, also compactors.
And I want to ask you about the next search, just above that. What is the time reflected for that search?
So that's going to be the visited location following after that. So visited, the link of what is the force of a garbage truck compactor.
Okay, and what is the time reflected for that?
That would be still January 6, 2022. Local time is 2:36:24 p.m.
Okay, and that time of approximately 2:36 p.m. And 2:35 p.m. If we go back to slide 19, Exhibit 19, page 15. What is the timing of that relative to the timing of the phone being consistent with being back in the area of 26 Ferrisford?
It's approximately 35 and 36 minutes after using that last Google location point of 2:05 p.m.
Okay, so the phone's consistent with going to that area, and then about a half hour later, we have this Google activity. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, cross-examination.
Good morning, Special Agent.
How you doing, sir?
Good yourself.
Good, thank you.
Good. Now, you stated that when asked the question, what is the most accurate data one can achieve from a phone, and you indicated it was timing events?
In the historical sense, yes, sir.
In historical sense? Okay. In a historical sense, would GPS be more accurate than timing events?
Source from where?
From anywhere. Anywhere one be able to source GPS information from.
It's going to depend on where that GPS is sourced from.
Say Google GPS, Google Maps.
Yeah, in some of this data here, yes, the Google location will give us a more accurate location of the exact location of where that phone is at a certain time, yes.
Okay, so in the perfect world, time in advance is not the most accurate. It would be GPS information, say from Google, correct?
I couldn't agree with the statement that it's the way that you phrased it, no.
Okay, but you would agree that GPS information from Google is more accurate as far as the specific location compared to time in advance, correct?
If I had Google location across every second, every minute of every day, and I didn't have any gaps, then that would be the most accurate to tell me where you are at this exact point in time.
Okay. Now, some of the red dots that we saw on these diagrams, you indicated that it wasn't GPS or it was different information that Google gave you. Could you explain that, please?
Yeah, so in the Google return, when it gives each of these points, there's a source column. The main ones where you get the most accurate in terms of the radius are going to be GPS and Wi-Fi sourced. This report from this phone did not have an explanation in the source as to what it is, but having worked with Google records frequently, I know that based off of the prior experiences and working with these records, that would be both GPS or Wi-Fi sourced.
GPS or Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Okay, and you wouldn't be able to distinguish which one, correct?
Certain points, so for some of the ones that might be extremely small, those are consistent with GPS. There was one point, I believe, in like 140 meter range. That would be consistent with what I've seen from Wi-Fi.
Okay. Now, we look back on slide number 9. From the times of 9:52 to 10:20, that's consistent with the phone number 5931 being in East Point?
Between the times I have of 9:52 p.m. and 10:20 p.m., records consist with being in East Point in the area of that address, yes, sir.
Okay. And I just couldn't help but notice the circle that was depicted on this particular diagram. It's not directly encompassing the particular address in East Point. Is there a particular reason why?
Yes, as I outlined on the overview slide, that circle just depicts the tower used and is not intended to illustrate the actual coverage area of that cell site.
Okay. And did you do any independent verification to determine whether or not that particular area would cover the East Point area or address?
I did not.
Okay. And you wouldn't, it'd be a fair statement, you wouldn't know exactly the coverage area or distance that that particular tower would have, correct?
I couldn't give you the exact coverage area, drawing you line by line of where it goes without going out there and doing the testing like that.
Okay. And it'd be a fair statement, one method of determining the distance from a particular tower would be for you to do a drive test, correct?
You could do a drive test to map out the actual coverage area, yes.
Okay, and you didn't do it. You didn't do that in this particular instance, correct?
I did not, no, sir.
Okay. And you stated that there was no information from the phone number of 5931 as to the time from, on slide number 10:52 to 1:46, it didn't give you any time in advance information from that particular number, correct?
It would be from 10:20 p.m. through 11:34 is the gap there.
Okay. So all your analysis was able to determine was that at one point in time it was in the area of East Point, and then later at the night it was in the area consisted in Greenfield, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, as far as gaining, I guess, approximate distance from a particular tower using time in advance, are you getting that information from the provider, or are you calculating that yourself?
That is actually provided by the provider in the report.
Okay.
On that line item, it tells you the date, the time, the tower sector, and that distance. So in this example, let's just pick one. For line 2, it says 0.34 miles.
Okay. Have you ever did any independent investigation or test to determine whether or not the number that they give you is actually accurate?
Yes, I use time events all the time to find missing people, fugitives, locate other evidence, and get down to that area of where that person is using that data.
Okay. Have you ever, say for instance, did a test of where there was a particular tower that said it's 0.5 miles to the particular device? Have you ever went into the field, had a device, and called from a particular number or using a particular tower, note your exact distance from that particular tower, and then compare it with the information you received from a time in advance report?
I have obtained test records before. I can't say I did every one of those steps in terms of making the call, but I have reviewed test records before that is consistent with where I was and where I have traveled.
Okay, when you say you reviewed them, did you conduct the test yourself?
I have, yes.
Okay. Now, would it be a fair statement that at some particular times during, I guess, whenever, that it could affect the distance or time for a signal to bounce back from the tower to the particular phone? Say, for instance, if it's a real cloudy day or if it's in a urban area.
Weather is not going to affect that time advance measurement. That measurement is required for everyone's phone to operate. If those measurements are not correct, then there would be collisions at the tower and everyone is not going to get the level of service that they expect, and the network's not going to work the way that it needs to.
Okay. What about certain geographical locations, such as if you compare a rural area versus an urban area that has a lot of tall buildings and a lot of other obstructions?
Yes, so topography, let's use that example. Let's say we're right here in downtown Detroit. It's still based off of line of sight. So let's say the tower's on one side of the building is the tower, I have a building, and then I'm right on the other side. If it takes the slightest indirect path, that could delay that signal slightly. So let's say it's maybe not 0.24, it's 0.29.
Okay, and then that could alter the estimate on how far a device is from the tower, correct?
Well, so those distances aren't estimates because they're actual records of events that happened in real time. So even if that measurement is 0.29, that's an actual measurement. So it may go out one arc, but I'm still consistent with that geographic area, because irrespective whether it's one arc or two arcs, those 2 points alone, I'm not giving the exact address. I'm still telling and identifying that that phone is consistent with that area.
Okay, and you indicated that it goes by line of sight, correct? So in layman's term, it would be if the tower is in a direct path to the particular phone without any obstructions. Would that be fair?
That's going to be the clearest line of sight, yes, sir.
Okay, and if something is in the way of that particular line of sight, it could or would alter the time it takes to signal to that particular tower and back to the phone, correct?
Yes, it could delay it slightly, yes.
Okay. And the time in advance is based upon the time it takes for a signal to go from the tower to the particular phone and back, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So the longer the time it takes to get to the tower, from the tower to the phone and back, it'll have a greater distance, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in theory, if a phone is not in a particular line of sight and it takes longer to get from the tower to the particular phone, it could give the appearance that the phone is actually further away from the tower than if it had been just a direct line of sight, correct?
Yes, that example I gave before, it might show one arc, for example, past. We're not going to, in my experience with working these, we're not going to see, where you're actually 0.24 and it's showing you 1.5 miles away from that tower.
Okay. Now, as far as a phone not being able to connect with the network, you indicated that could be for a variety of reasons, correct?
Yeah, those examples we gave, whether the powered off or
Battery.
something else. Yeah.
Battery went dead?
Yep.
Okay. And also, you stated that if it was on airplane mode, it would lose contact with the network, correct?
Yeah. So the airplane mode. So you're not going to see a cell tower. In today's day and age, you could be on the airplane mode and do
Wi-Fi, correct?
correct Wi-Fi calling.
Okay.
But as I mentioned before, in these records, there's an indicator 2B, and then all the calls are going to voicemail. If you are on Wi-Fi, you would still see that record going through, but this phone is off the network.
Okay, so you indicated that if you were on Wi-Fi, that the phone would not go straight to voicemail. It would be able to intercept or answer the phone calls?
It still may go to voicemail, but you're going to see on the call detail records a denotion in there that's going to allow me to identify that it was using Wi-Fi for that event. So if you called me and I was on Wi-Fi, I would see you still calling me, and I'm going to see an indicator in there that I can tell you that my phone was on Wi-Fi during that time.
Okay. Did you request GPS information in this particular case?
I just got the information from the T-Mobile for the phone records, and then I was provided the Google location for the defendant's home.
Okay. Now, if we look at slide number 12, you indicated that you couldn't say for sure if the phone is moving or not, correct?
I'm saying that in that entire time frame, I can't say it moved during that entire 7-minute window. There are some records in here, as you can see from the Google location, where it's consistent with movement, but I don't have a record for every second during that 7-minute window to say that it was moving the entire time.
Okay, and is this a timing advance? The arc we see, is that a timing advance analysis?
That is a timing advance measurement.
Okay.
And that is 0.39 miles from that powered sector.
How often can you get different timing advance measurements? Is it per second, per minute, or it just depends on what you have?
The timing advance I mentioned before is always going on in the background. It comes back to a matter of what is retained and then provided by T-Mobile in this case in response to the search warrant. As you saw for the defendant's phone, we have a lot of timing advance measurements. For the victim's phone, I had one line. Again, it doesn't mean that timing advance was not occurring on the victim's phone. It just was not retained and then provided by T-Mobile.
Thank you. No further questions.
You be right.
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly. There are some questions about GPS data. And just to be clear, can you go to T-Mobile and ask for GPS data about the location of a specific phone at a specific time?
Historically, no. You can't go to them and say, give me all the GPS location.
Okay, here we have GPS data from a separate source from Google, correct?
That's correct.
And that just kind of provides an extra layer of sort of analysis here, right?
Yeah, it's a second data source that I frequently overlaid with phone records or other things before.
Okay, and in terms of the analysis that you did here when it comes to the defendant's phone, is there any inconsistencies between the GPS data from Google and the location data that you have from timing advance records and call detail records from T-Mobile?
No, when we do our analysis, we look at everything in totality. In totality, as everyone saw here, look at the slides, they're all consistent for each of those points in the slides in terms of the movement and travel during each of those periods.
Okay, and again, during this like 10 p.m. time frame on January 4th of 2022, where's the phone attributed to the defendant consistent with being at that time?
At which time, sir?
Around 10 p.m.
Around 10 p.m., it's going to be consistent with the area of the Greenfield address.
Okay, and then again, just to reiterate, by around 10:41 p.m., where is that phone then consistent with being?
It's then consistent with the area of the Melrose Court address in East Point.
And then at 11:15 p.m., where is the phone consistent with being back at that time?
Around 11:15 p.m., beginning around 11:16 p.m., it's consistent with being back at the geographic area of the Greenfield address.
And then at the 2 a.m. to 2:07 a.m. time frame, is that what's reflected here on slide 12?
It is.
And at that point, the phone is consistent with being where?
The geographic area around the Beresford location.
Okay. And for the victim's phone, we have much more limited data, correct?
That is correct.
But at around 10:20, the data that we do have, where does that show that her phone is consistent with being?
It's consistent over in the area of the Melrose Court address in East Point.
And then by 11:15 p.m. that same night, is it consistent with being somewhere else?
The first record of hers around 11:34. So around 11:34, it's consistent with over in the area of the Greenfield address in Detroit.
Okay. And then at 1:15 a.m., there's no further location data available from her phone, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any response?
Just a couple questions. Now, Special Agent, you stated that historically you can't just call T-Mobile and receive GPS information.
Correct.
Are there some circumstances where T-Mobile can provide GPS location for a particular device?
So when we're saying GPS, we need to clarify that when you get latitude, longitude information, it's not always GPS sourced. So if you think of when you open your mapping software, when you see that little like blue dot, right? It's based on your GPS, you're going to see a really small kind of shaded area. You can get latitude, longitude information, let's say from T-Mobile, if you had a search warrant that allowed you to locate a phone in real time, but though it's not always going to be GPS. That might give me a 1.5 mile or larger radius. It's not always going to give you that, and that's the only way you can get it would be in real time, not historically.
Okay.
But it's not always going to be GPS, so I want to make sure that's clear. We're just talking latitude, longitude coordinates.
Okay, so to be clear, you stated the only way you would be able to get longitude, latitude information from T-Mobile would be from with a court order indicating that you wanted that specific information, correct? As far as the longitude, latitude, correct?
So if we want to start getting into now latitude, longitude information, there's network estimated locations that T-Mobile may provide.
Okay.
That you could get historically, but that's not their true GPS. That's their estimated locations.
Okay.
When you're talking about anything in real time, which you're going to get, which is going to give you these dots, for example, and an accuracy radius in real time location information, say looking for a missing kid, that's the only time we get that information in real time.
Okay, and say for instance in those examples that you're looking for a missing kid, would that information be more accurate than, say, historical information?
No. Generally, in my experience, if I'm looking for a missing kid, I am looking at the time advance record because I mentioned commonly active location information from T-Mobile could be 1.5 miles or greater. That's going to give me the east side of Detroit. Timing advance, I can get you down to potentially a few houses on a block based off the information.
No further questions, thank you.
Right.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any questions from the jury? All right, sir. Seeing none. It's spelled.
Detective Ian Reinhold. First name is I-A-N, last name R-E-I-N-H-O-L-D.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir. Can you tell the jury what you do for a living?
I'm a police officer in the city of East Point.
And how long have you been a police officer?
Almost 16 years.
And what's your current role with the city of East Point?
A detective.
And was that the same role that you were in back in January of 2022?
Yes.
And in January of 22, did you have some involvement in what was initially a missing persons case?
Yes.
And who was the person that was missing?
Is I.N. Foster?
what was sort of the first step that you took in terms of your involvement with the case?
I came into work and reviewed what was going on with it. On my way into work that night, I remember making some phone calls, and I received information that she was missing before. Then I got into work, and her mother, Sierra Milton, was in the lobby, so I went right in there and just started talking to her about it.
Okay, and do you remember what day that was?
That was January 7th.
Okay. And you said you had received some information that Zion had been missing before, is that correct?
Correct.
And so had she been reported sort of as a runaway before?
She was from our city on January 5th. I believe the report was made, the initial report.
I'm saying before this incident, had she been reported previously?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other report was made on January 5th, you said?
Yes.
Okay. After that first interaction you had with Miss Milton, were there any developments the next day on January 8th?
The next day, there were some, I did speak with her, with Miss Milton, and there were some scam artists starting to call her and try to get money from her. And if she'd send them money, they would let her know where she was at.
Okay, and what type of scam artists were going on at that point? I mean, was it people saying they had information?
Yes.
And demanding money?
Yes.
And were these sort of things looked into?
Yes.
Did any of them end up appearing to be legitimate sort of sources of information about the whereabouts of Zion?
No.
Okay. At some point, was there a particular person of interest who came to light in the missing persons investigation?
Yes.
And who was that person?
Jaylin Brazier.
And eventually, at some point, did you have an opportunity to meet with that person in person?
Yes.
And do you see him in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And just for the record, could you point to him and describe what he's wearing?
He has a blue suit on, navy blue. He has a light blue dress shirt and a light blue tie on, black dress shoes.
Okay. If the record could reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant.
So reflected.
At some point during the course of the missing persons investigation, did you make efforts to contact Mr. Brazier?
Yes.
And what was the date of the first time you attempted to contact him?
January 10th, 2022.
And what was the nature of that initial attempted contact that you had?
Hey, how you doing? Have you seen Zion? Basically, to have a conversation with him to see what he had to say about it. With all the ongoings in the investigation, I had to wait a couple days as things came in. So I did talk to him.
Did he say anything to you about the whereabouts of Zion Foster?
He didn't know where she was. Hasn't seen her. In our conversation, he hasn't seen her in months.
Okay. And did he offer any other information about Zion's potential whereabouts during that initial conversation you had?
He said that he hasn't seen her in months. He said that she has been missing before, and he found out she was using his house like as an excuse when she left before. I believe he said she was gone for 2 months at one point, one time she was missing.
Okay. After that initial conversation that you had with Mr. Brazier, did you have any further conversations with him?
After that day?
After
Yes.
that day, yeah. When was the next time that you had contact with him?
On the 11th, I called him by phone, and I asked him if he would come in and talk to me.
Okay. And did he agree to come in to talk to you?
He said he would call me back with a time, and that was it for the day.
Okay. And did he ever call you back?
He did not.
And did you make further attempts to get into contact with him at that point?
Yes, I did.
How many times would you say you attempted to contact him at that point to talk?
3 more times.
Okay. What were the dates of those 3 additional times that you attempted to contact him?
On the 12th, I called him in the morning, left him a voicemail. In the afternoon, I called him again on the 12th. And then one more time on the 13th in the morning, I called and left a voicemail.
Okay. And at some point during the course of the investigation, did some relevant video footage come into your possession?
Yes.
And what was the source of that footage? How did you come into possession of it?
There was a ring video that was sent to me
Okay.
from Melrose in East Point.
And what's the significance of that location on Melrose?
The video faces Zion's house.
Okay. And was there any other video that you came into possession of?
Yes, there was video of 19451 Greenfield. There's video of that house
Okay.
from across the street.
And I want to walk through some of that video right now that's been admitted as exhibits 21 and 22. So I want to start with exhibit 22. May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
And may I publish 21 at the appropriate time as well?
Sure.
Thank you. I want to bring up this. So there's 2 files on the exhibit. Are you familiar with both of those video files?
Yes.
And if I click on the first one, ending 2219, the file name for the record. And this, again, what's the source of this particular footage?
This right here is from an email, and it was downloaded from the Ring app.
Okay. And the house sort of at the center of the video, is there any, I guess, significance to that particular house?
That is Zion's house, 22166.
Okay, and that's on Melrose in
Melrose
East
in
Point?
East Point. Yes, sir.
Okay, and you have some familiarity with that area?
Yes.
And the timestamp on the video right now, and just for the record, I've stopped at I think 12 seconds, and I'm going to go back to the start. What's the timestamp reflected on the video?
January 4th, 2022, 22:19 hours and 10 seconds.
And do you have, I guess, experience dealing with Ring videos throughout your time as a detective?
I've used it before, some of the videos, yes.
And do you have any reason to doubt the sort of accuracy of that time?
I don't doubt it.
And I'm just gonna start the video. What I guess this, you see the car that goes by. Is there any significance to that particular vehicle in terms of the investigation?
No.
Okay. And this is just one clip from 10:19 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is it what is your understanding of how Ring cameras work in terms of when they record, when they don't record?
Motion or noise?
Okay, so if there's motion, that triggers the recording.
Yes.
So if a car drives down the street, that could potentially trigger the recording.
If it's set up that way.
Okay. And this particular time at 10:19, this just happens to be one of the clips that was obtained, correct?
Correct.
if we go to the second clip, in the file ending 2241, back to the beginning. What's the time reflected in this clip?
The time is 22:41 and 59 seconds.
And if I restart it, and you see the car pull into a driveway at that point, is that correct?
Yes.
And in terms of the driveway that it pulled into, is that the driveway of Zion's home or a different home?
That's a different home.
And in terms of the vehicle that you saw pull in at, this is 10:42 p.m., was there any significance to that vehicle in terms of the investigation?
Yes.
And let me ask you this. During the course of the investigation, did you have an opportunity to familiarize yourself with whether the defendant owned and used a particular type of vehicle?
Yes.
And what type of vehicle did the defendant use at this time?
A 2005 white Acura.
Okay, and looking at this vehicle that we just saw in this footage, is that a vehicle that is, in your experience, consistent or inconsistent with the type of vehicle the defendant drove?
Consistent.
And you also mentioned some footage that you obtained from across the street from the Greenfield location. And I'm going to publish Exhibit 21. And there's 3 files on here. I'm going to start, for the record, with the file ending 441. And this particular video, what's your understanding of the type of system that captured this video?
I don't know what system it is.
So you didn't have like personal familiarity with this particular system?
Correct.
Okay, but in terms of the system's positioning, based on the video and based on your familiarity with the Greenfield location, where was the system positioned?
Across the street.
Okay. And this footage, is it fair to say this was like a screen grab from somebody's phone
Yes.
that you came into possession of? And does that indicate particular dates and times?
I see some times on here. When you play it, it might have the date also on the bottom.
Okay. So I'm going to start the video. And it might be too small to see on this screen, but are you able to see a date reflected here on the video?
Yes.
And what is the date that's reflected?
January 4th, 2022.
And what's the time that's reflected?
2,300 hours and 55 seconds.
And you've reviewed this video before?
Yes.
And you reviewed other evidence in the case?
Yes.
And based on your role in the investigation and your understanding of the evidence, do you have any reason to be skeptical of the times reflected on this video?
No.
Okay. So at this point on the video, at the 11 p.m. point, is there a particular building here that's significant in terms of the investigation that's reflected here?
The house on the far left. The most left tree is 19451 Greenfield.
Okay. And so if I use my cursor to point to it, would that be this house right here?
Yes.
And where would the driveway, are you familiar with that location, I guess, throughout the course of your investigation?
Yes.
And did you, throughout the course of your investigation, identify someone who resided there?
Yes.
And who was it that resided there?
Jaylin Brazier.
And is this particular building a duplex?
Yes.
And do you recall which side of the duplex Mr. Brazier resided at?
The left side.
Okay, so it'd be this side.
Yes.
And where would the driveway be associated with his side of the duplex?
Just to the left of that tree, right where the mouse is at.
Okay, and at this point in time, reflected at 11 p.m., is there any vehicle in that driveway?
No.
Okay. And so now would it be fair to say that that clip is ending and we're going to see a different clip from this camera system?
Yes.
And what is the time reflected on the video at this point?
23:10 and 39 seconds.
Okay. And did you see any vehicles in the driveway at that point?
I did not.
And what's the time reflected now?
23:14 and 20 seconds.
Okay, now at this point, at 11:14, do you see a vehicle in the frame?
Yes.
And is there any significance to that particular vehicle in terms of the investigation?
Yes.
And what is that significance?
It appears to be a similar vehicle that picked Zion up from Melrose Street in East Point.
Okay. And then if we move on to the next clip, what's the time reflected at this point?
23:15 hours and 7 seconds.
And in terms of the driveway, is there anything significant now in terms of the investigation in the driveway?
There's a white car in the driveway.
Okay, I'm going to continue playing the video. And I know it's a little bit hard to see on this particular screen, but have you looked at this video, sort of close up on your computer?
Yes.
And at this point in the video, at 11:15 p.m., in terms of the investigation, was there anything significant identified?
Yes.
And what was that?
An individual at the front door.
Okay, how many?
2.
2?
Yes.
Okay. And that next clip was also at 11:15, but just showed the vehicle stationary. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
then this next clip was at 11:52. It was briefly shown. Is that correct?
Correct.
And now we're at 11:58. And as far as you can tell, is the vehicle still stationary in the driveway?
Yes.
I'm going to move to the next file. And for the record, this file on Exhibit 21 ends in 1183. And at this point, we're at 1:10 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is the vehicle still stationary?
It is.
At this point, we're at 1:37 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
And again, is the vehicle just stationary?
It is.
Again, now we're at 1:39 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
And again, is the vehicle stationary?
Yes.
And at this point, we're at 1:41 a.m. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as far as you're aware, is this the first time the vehicle moves after 11:15 p.m.?
Yes.
And at this point, we're at 1:47 a.m. And where is the vehicle at this point?
It's backed up on the side of the house.
So that be back in this area?
Yes.
And at this point, we're at 1:48 p.m. or a.m. I'm sorry, is that correct?
Correct.
And in terms of, I'm going to pause the video briefly. In terms of the area around the front door, is there anything significant that was observed in terms of the investigation at this point?
There's an individual standing right there outside the door.
And at this point, In terms of the area around the car, was there anything significant that was observed?
The light just came on in the car. It looked like someone was at the passenger side, then they're on the driver's side.
Now we're at 1:49 a.m., is that correct?
That's correct.
And after this point, is the driveway then empty again?
It is.
Now are we at 1:57 a.m.?
Yes.
And is there anything notable in the driveway at this point?
No.
Now we're at 1:59 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
And again, anything notable in the driveway at this point?
No.
And I'm now going to publish the final file on Exhibit 21. For the record, it ends 1894. We're starting at 2:02 a.m., is that correct?
Yes.
And is there anything notable in the driveway at that point?
No.
And now we're at 2:15 a.m., is that correct?
Yes.
And is there anything notable at this point?
The white car is pulling back in the driveway.
Now we're at 2:16 a.m., is that correct?
Correct.
And the car is just still in the driveway at this point?
Yes.
And now we're at 2:42 a.m., is that correct?
Correct.
And is the car still in the driveway?
Yes.
And was there anything significant in terms of that last portion that we just observed?
No.
Play that again. How about that?
Well, the trunk opening?
And that's at 2:42 a.m.?
Yes.
And now we're at 2:43 a.m., is that correct?
Correct.
And at that point, the car's backing out, would that be fair to say?
Yes.
And now at 2:43 a.m., the driveway's empty again, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. As part of your role in this investigation, did you draft some search warrants?
I did.
And just as a general matter, just to make it clear for the jury, what is a search warrant?
Search warrant is for to go in someone's house, phone, car, cell phone records. You have to get it, you type it out and the judge has to sign it.
Okay, and did you draft a search warrant for phone records in this case?
Yes.
And was that for phone records from the defendant and from Zion Foster?
Yes.
Okay. And did you also draft a search warrant to search the vehicle that was observed in these videos?
Yes.
And did you also draft a search warrant to search the home belonging to the defendant on Greenfield?
Yes.
And at some point, was the defendant's home searched?
Yes.
And did you participate in that search?
Yes.
Who else participated in the search?
The FBI was there. Their team was
Okay.
also there.
And so they had a team of people to process the search. Would that be accurate to say?
Yes.
Now, in terms of your role there, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. I want to show you what's been admitted as Exhibit 10. I'm sorry, Exhibit 11. You see the background in this exhibit?
Yes.
Are you familiar with this exhibit?
Yes.
Is there anything significant about that background in connection with the search that you conducted at the Greenfield residence?
That screenshot would be consistent with 19451 Greenfield, the inside.
And in terms of your search of that home, did you observe anything significant?
I believe so. There was a cracked up yellow iPhone in the family room. There's a vacuum cleaner, empty vacuum box from the new vacuum cleaner. Appeared to be a suicide note on the kitchen table. In the backyard, there was a metal table with some glass. Didn't seem weathered.
Okay. And that table was outside?
Yes.
Okay. You said it didn't seem weathered. What do you mean by that?
It wasn't all rusty. It didn't appear like it's been outside for a year. It didn't seem like it was that long. It was any long.
At some point, did you come into possession of the defendant's cell phone?
Yes.
And did you do anything with that cell phone when it came into your possession?
Yes.
What did you do with it?
I got a search warrant for it, and I went to the phone, and then after I gave it to Detroit police to be dumped.
Okay. And when you got the search warrant for it, did you ever have an opportunity to turn the phone on?
Yes,
And did you look through the phone?
I did.
Did you see anything that caught your attention?
Yes.
And what was it?
Zion's number was not in there, and it appeared there was nothing before January 6th.
Okay. At some point, did you participate in a interview of Mr. Brazier?
Yes,
And was that on January 19th of 2022?
I believe it was.
Okay. And who was present at that interview?
Jaylin Brazier, his attorney, and Sergeant Jones from Detroit Police.
Okay. And when you say his attorney, this was a prior attorney that he had representing him?
Yes.
Okay. And after that interview, was there ultimately a case that was initiated in Macomb County relating to the investigation that you did in this case?
Yes.
And as part of that case being initiated in Macomb County, was Mr. Brazier at some point held somewhere in Macomb County?
Yes.
And where would that have been?
Macomb County Jail.
Okay. And just to, I guess, clarify, that Macomb County case did not involve charges of murder, correct?
Correct.
Would that have been for involving the sort of statements that he had given to you denying that he had been with Zion?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Good morning, Detective.
Morning, sir.
Now, you reviewed some footage, viewed footage of a Ring camera that was from the East Point location, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you personally did not extract this footage, did you?
I did not.
Okay. And you were asked whether or not you doubt the time being accurate, and you stated that you had no reason to doubt it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You didn't do any type of independent verification to determine whether or not that particular date was accurate, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you didn't do any type of independent verification to verify whether that time was accurate, correct?
That's correct.
And you also stated that some Ring cameras operate differently depending on the settings, if it's by sound or if it's by motion, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, that's your understanding, okay. And you're not an expert on Ring cameras, correct?
I am not.
Okay. And you didn't do any independent verification to see how this particular Ring camera was set up, correct?
Correct.
And in reference to the video footage that allegedly depicts from the Greenfield address, you don't even know what type of system that was, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you wouldn't even know whether or not how that particular camera is set to record, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you didn't do any independent verification on that particular camera system as far as trying to determine whether or not the date was accurate, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't do any independent verification to see if the time was correct, correct?
Correct.
Okay. This particular footage was forwarded to you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the only footage you were able to view is the footage that whoever allegedly took the video footage, the individual time frame that they selected were the only ones you were able to view, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you were not able to view other time frames outside of which ones were provided to you, correct?
Correct.
And you had an opportunity to get a search warrant for this particular device, correct?
I did.
And you just failed to do so?
I don't recall what the situation was, but I never ended up getting a search warrant for it.
Okay. And you never got a search warrant for the Ring camera in the East Point location, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you stated that this particular automobile that was in East Point to you, it appeared to be a similar car as Mr. Brazier's, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but you can't definitively say it was the exact car. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You were not able to view the license plate for his car, correct?
I couldn't see it, no.
Okay. And you can't definitively say what make and model this particular car was, correct?
Correct.
Now, you were present during the search warrant, correct?
I was.
Okay. And you didn't see or recall any blood being found in this particular location, correct?
That's correct.
And you made reference to a table that was outside, correct?
Yes.
The glass was outside also, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it would, from your, I guess, opinion, it would seem like this table was broken outside, correct?
No, I mean, it could have been broken outside and some pieces were out there. I don't know how. I can't answer your question.
Okay, but the pieces, the broken pieces of glass were outside, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In this iPhone you recovered, it didn't have any evidentiary value in this particular case, did it?
I don't know. I did not have any, no.
Okay. And you personally didn't take any pictures of this particular residence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you didn't have any pictures as which to verify whether or not this particular screenshot actually originated from this particular location, correct?
No.
Okay.
I watched the body cam video.
You didn't have any pictures, correct?
Oh, correct, yes.
Now, at some point in time, you spoke to Mr. Brazier's then attorney, correct?
Correct.
And he called you to make arrangements for Mr. Brazier and himself to come in and make a statement, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And this was in the same time vicinity of when you reached out to Mr. Brazier, correct?
I believe that was January 18th.
Okay.
Yes.
Same time frame, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, in fact, Mr. Brazier and his attorney did come in, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And provided a statement, correct?
Correct.
At some point in time, you spoke to Ms. Foster's mother, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And she came into the East Point police station, correct? From your understanding, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you think it was just another runaway at first?
I did.
Okay. Because you had prior knowledge that Miss Foster, Zion Foster, ran away before, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it was your understanding that, or maybe opinion, that some of Zion Foster's mother's conduct was somewhat odd to you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you were under the understanding that, or opinion, that maybe she didn't investigate to the fullest potential to find her daughter, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, as far as this Greenfield location, you were unable to ascertain who exited from the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you can't definitively say that video was from the date it purports to be from, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Detective. No further questions.
Redirect.
Detective, I just want to make, I guess, one thing clear. Your initial phone contact with the defendant was on what date?
January 10th?
January 10th. And then you had a subsequent conversation with him the next day, is that correct?
Yes.
And then I believe you said you made some multiple attempts in the days after that to contact him, correct?
Correct.
And it wasn't until the 18th that there were some arrangements made for him to come in and make a statement,
That's correct.
and then he actually showed up on the 19th, is that correct?
Correct.
So there was a pretty significant gap in time, is that right?
It was about a week,
Okay.
just over a week.
And during that time, what was going on with this case publicly? Was there media attention?
Yes,
How much?
a lot.
Nothing further.
Anything for us?
No, nothing further. Thank you.
All right, any questions from the jury? Questions, counsel, please approach. Okay, sir, you can step down.
Thank you.